NMH at 1 highlights the news making waves ranging from current affairs, community stories, sports and economic news. Here are the news headlines. Disinterest in green hydrogen birthed a secrecy perception according to Munyupe. Over Cyril Ramaphosa farm robbery. And Donald Trump clashes repeatedly with judge in heated New York testimony. I am Diana Master. Address the housing situation to curb the housing demand and land management challenges we encounter in our town. According to RTC spokesperson Desiree Peters, the objective of the conference is to engage and source input from stakeholders and industry leaders to learn, benchmark, share best practices and partnerships, and at the same time market the untapped potential of the town. Visual News highlights local stories from across Namibia right after the break. Stay with NMH at 1.
Hello and welcome to today's Sports Rep Show.
I am your host, Jesse Jackson Kauraifa. In replay, Namibia, who had won the toss for the first time on this tour.
Good day everyone, time for international sports news, starting off with tennis news, both on the WTA for women's and
Getting into today's visual news clips, Karina Mutenya, the chair of Namibia Country Coordinator of the Global Fund, gave the opening remarks at the 15th meeting of the National HIV Multi-Sector Leadership Forum. Let's have a look.
Not long ago, AIDS really devastated our lives. Your personal convictions to dedicate unwaveringly.
Affairs Officer Kadiva Hamutuma said, Umwediva and Oshakati in the Oshana region, some towns in Oshikoto, as well as the Omusati and Ohangwena regions have been experiencing either water shortages or no water at all for the past weeks. Homesteads that played host to weddings over the weekend were also left frustrated by the lack of water in their areas. Hamutuma said water interruptions were caused by emergency maintenance on the Omahenene Olushanja section of the Kaleka Canal in Omusati last month. The Republican leads with an app that wants to reduce hospital admissions. An elderly-friendly app that was born out of a need to improve the health of members with chronic diseases and thus reduce their hospital admissions will soon be available in Namibia. The medical insurance industry recorded a loss of 500 million Namibian dollars during the 2022-2023 year, with the industry struggling financially for various reasons, which include a concerning trend of high hospital admissions. The application CliniTouch has been successfully used in the British National Health Service for nearly a decade and has since spread to developing countries. Clinico Health, the administrator of the medical fund Heritage Health, is a certified partner for the CliniTouch Global and SADC. The app is available for free to all Heritage Health members and at a fee for non-members, other medical funds and clinical practices. On page 3, Republican reports that the PDM Member of Parliament Dipo Hamata has called for urgent action to combat the deep-rooted issues contributing to high crime rates in the country. He was contributing to a debate in Parliament on rising crime in Namibia. Hamata emphasized that it is critical to consider the underlying factors contributing to surging crime rates and the immediate measures needed to address the issue. He said Namibia is facing an alarming rise in criminal activities, posing a severe threat to the safety and well-being of our citizens. The escalating crime rates are undermining the social fabric of our communities and instilling fear in the hearts of Namibians. Amata said one of the significant contributors to the high crime rate in Namibia is the leniency of existing laws and regulations. The Allgemeine Zeitung leads with Namibia's government having to invest billions of dollars in new roads, rail networks, power lines and pipelines for green hydrogen, according to the Commissioner for Green Hydrogen, James Munyupe. A new larger port for Luderitz Bay is also planned. Munyupe explained at a press conference that this public infrastructure is the responsibility of the government and does not belong to the planned green hydrogen industrial facility outside of Luderitz Bay. He said this is currently their main task in the presidential presidential office, and they are exploring options to obtain cheap loans. He stated that the new port south of Ludwig's Bay would cost approximately 500 million euros. On page 3, Allgemeine Zeitung reports that an environmental consultant says Namibia Marine Phosphate's proposed mining project off the coast of Namibia has received the most scrutiny, despite providing relevant government agencies with the advanced, scientifically sound data on the matter. Environmental compliance consultancy consultant Jessica Bezwiedenhout, who was responding to questions from lawmakers during a briefing to the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Natural Resources, said the protracted process involved in getting NMP's proposed marine phosphate mining said objections by various stakeholders tainted the image of the project. The company's application for an environmental compliance certificate has been sitting with Environmental Commissioner Theophilus Nitila following legal challenges lodged against NMP to have the issuance of license declared invalid. That brings us to the end of the first half of our newspaper review segment. After the break, we take a look at what's leading on the Namibian newspaper's front page.
Neo Paints has established a 67-year Namibian legacy, creating personalized paint solutions that blend quality and innovation for the Namibian people. We pride ourselves in being a 100% Namibian-owned company, investing in our country and our people by employing and empowering true Namibians. With every brushstroke, Neo Paints commits to our quality guarantee and always delivering a coat of excellence. At Neo Paints, we always stay true to our country. We are as Namibian as you.
Let's move on right along with our newspaper review segment. The Anti-Corruption Commission is still carrying out investigations before a request can be made for the extradition of the Icelandic citizens alleged to have been involved in the Fish Road fishing quotas fraud and corruption case, Prosecutor General Martha Imalwa says in an affidavit filed at the Windhoek High Court on Friday. A number of lines inquiry being pursued by ACC investigators have contributed to a delay in finalizing an extradition request that is to be submitted to the government of Iceland, Imalwa says in the affidavit, in which she gives the court an update on the status of the criminal investigation and extradition proceedings in the Fish Rod case. On the paper's page 3, Namibia has witnessed the groundbreaking ceremony of what will be the first carbon-neutral iron ore mine in the world, as reported in the paper. The mine at Farm Bloemfontein 109 near Arandis is worth 600 million Namibian dollars. The project, known as the Hylrons Oshivela project, is the first green iron project in the world and a first for Namibia. Namibia has enough to supply the whole world with all the iron ore needed, and this project will be producing 15,000 tons in its pilot stage, which puts Namibia at center stage, Johannes Michels, the managing director of the project, said yesterday. The pilot stage is set to start towards the end of next year. Christine Koibe's assertion over the weekend that the late Agali Doseb only contributed the melody of Namibia's national anthem was squashed by the presidency yesterday. Koibes, who was the minister in the presidency, said during the 46th Galb Festival that Doseb, who passed away on 27 October 2023, only provided the melody for the anthem Namibia, Land of the Brave, which has been a symbol of the nation's unity and pride since 1991. According to Koibes, Doseb was one of those who were instrumental in crafting the national anthem. He explained that a committee was assembled that was supposed to craft the national anthem. He, Doseb, was one of the committee members. Some provided the lyrics, and he was the one who provided the melody. So it is against this background that we cannot attribute the crafting of the national anthem to one person only because a committee did it, Koibes added. According to New Era's front page, Africa is lagging when it comes to the provision of safe drinking water and sanitation, as these basic services are still not accessible to 800 million Africans. At the same time, African cities and urban centers are growing rapidly, and by 2050, they will be home to over 1 billion people. This grim reality was shared by Agriculture Minister Karl Schlettwein during the opening of the African Sanitation Conference underway in Swakopmund. Over 500 delegates from Africa, international partners, and the African Union are attending the conference that was initiated to provide a platform for technical and political dialogue with governments and stakeholders to identify and share knowledge to address the sanitation and hygiene challenges in Africa. Speaking at the opening, Stetwein said Africa is cognizant of the fact that rapid urbanization, poverty, and inequality limit planning capacities and other urban dynamics which increase people's exposure and vulnerability to hazards. Moving over to Market Watch, the South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago said the central bank won't hesitate to do what's needed to preserve price stability. The central bank is determined to protect the income of the poor, and when inflation rises, we will tackle it, he said. SARB held interest rates at 8.25% in September, while warning the outlook for inflation remains clouded by uncertainty. Kganyago has repeatedly cautioned against prematurely declaring victory in the fight to bring price pressures under control. Still, the inflation rate has declined from a 2022 peak of 7.8% and stood at 5.4% in September, somewhat above the midpoint of the central bank's 3% to 6% target range, where it prefers to anchor price pressures. Kganyago said risks to inflation include El Niño-induced weather conditions and climate change on food production, higher oil prices, and currency fluctuations. In economic news, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana are under pressure to cut the state's workforce, which is some of the highest paid workers in the world. Stay with NMH at 1 for the full story, coming up after the break.
Hello and welcome to today's Sports Rep Show.
I am your host, Jesse Jackson Kauraifa. In replay, Namibia, who had won the toss for the first time on this tour.
Good day everyone, time for international sports news, starting off with tennis news, both on the WTA for women's and
In economic news this afternoon, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana are under pressure to cut the state's workforce, which is some of the highest paid workers in the world. More than 55,000 public servants earn more than 1 million rand per year, which according to experts is not even performance driven. The government workforce is almost 2 million. In the medium-term budget policy statement, which Godongwana tabled this week, the National Treasury admits that the wage bill for public servants is 3.5% higher than the average of 38 member countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. These countries include Australia, Canada, the US, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. If the percentage of total employees is considered, South Africa has fewer public servants than countries with high wage bills such as Norway and Denmark. This means that South Africa's public servants' high compensation levels are the reason for the excessive wage bill, not a higher number of people employed. Since 2013, the average compensation of public servants has grown faster than the numbers employed, mostly due to salary hikes that were higher than inflation. Let's take a look at the economic indicators. The Namibian dollar trades at 22.54 to the British pound, 19.61 to the euro, 18.35 to the US dollar, and 2 Namibian dollars and 52 cents buys you 1 Chinese yuan. First Rand Namibia MTC and Namibia Breweries Limited stocks took a dip on the NSX. Local index closed on a downturn of 0.01%, while overall index closed on an upturn of 3.51%. All commodities took a dip. Gold, copper, platinum, respectively 0.53%, 1.10%, 1%, and 2.02%. We now expand beyond Namibia's borders to give you news from the African continent. Two men have been arrested in connection with the theft of foreign currency that was stuffed under a sofa cushion at South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's Palapala farm in 2020. The suspects will appear in court on Tuesday. Police spokesperson Colonel Katlego Mogale said they are planning to arrest a third person. Dubbed Farmgate, the controversy first came to light when Arthur Fraser, the former head of the country's state security agency, filed a criminal complaint against President Ramaphosa last year. Mr. Fraser accused the president of bribery, money laundering, and concealing a crime in relation to the alleged theft of an estimated $4 million from his farm. He stated that President Ramaphosa did not report the theft to the police in an attempt to cover up the existence of the large sum of cash. Mr. Ramaphosa confirmed the theft but disputed the figure, saying it was $580,000 and not $4 million that had been stolen from his property, and denied any criminal activity. He says the money came from selling buffaloes. The president was cleared of any wrongdoing by the ombudswoman, also known as the public protector, in June. In our next story, Uganda's president has downplayed the U.S. decision to expel the East African country from a major trade deal. Last week, Joe Biden announced Uganda and 3 other countries would be dropped from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, also known as AGOA. The U.S. had previously said it might take such action after Uganda passed a tough new anti-homosexuality law. On Sunday, President Yoweri Museveni urged Ugandans not to be over-concerned. Some of these actors in the Western world overestimate themselves and underestimate the freedom fighters of Africa, President Museveni said on X. AGOA, introduced in 2000, gives eligible sub-Saharan African countries duty-free access to the U.S. for more than 1,800 products. Stick around. Right after the break, we bring you international news. Donald Trump clashed repeatedly with the judge and defended his family's business as he testified in a civil fraud trial in New York. During almost 4 hours on the witness stand, the former president disputed claims that he deceived banks and aired grievances with the case. The judge has already ruled the Trump organization committed fraud, and this trial will determine the penalties. Prosecutors are seeking a $250 million fine and severe business restrictions. Stick around. After the break, local sports news.
Neo Paints has established a 67-year Namibian legacy, creating personalized paint solutions that blend quality and innovation for the Namibian people. We pride ourselves in being a 100% Namibian-owned company, investing in our country and our people by employing and empowering true Namibians. With every brushstroke, Neo Paints commits to our quality guarantee and always delivering a coat of excellence. At Neo Paints, we always stay true to our country. We are as Namibian as you.
In local sports news this afternoon, in a remarkable display of unity and support, the 4th edition of the MTC Knockout Project is dedicating its efforts to raising funds for the Tafellaga Brave Warriors as the team gears up for the 2024 Africa Cup of Nations to be held in Ivory Coast in January 2024. The Trustco NTA Junior Masters Tennis Tournament, held on November 3rd and 4th, 2023, cemented its reputation as the foundation from which young Namibian future tennis stars are launched. The past weekend once again provided the NTA Trustco Junior Masters as the pinnacle of junior tennis events on the annual calendar. Right after this, we bring you international sports news, and thereafter, news highlights. Tottenham Hotspur's hopes of returning to the top of the Premier League were dashed in an extraordinary fashion as they lost 4-1 at home to Chelsea after Nicholas Jackson hat-trick in a chaotic London derby that they finished with 9 men on Monday. It was a triumphant return to Spurs for Mauricio Pochettino, who got the biggest win of his short Chelsea tenure, though few could have imagined how it would be achieved on a mind-boggling night of VAR decisions, fraying tempers and disallowed goals. That brings us to the end of our international sports news. Stick around for the news highlights. You're watching NMH at 1. If you're just joining us, here are the news highlights from today's broadcast. 2 men have been arrested in connection with the theft of foreign currency that was stuffed under a sofa cushion at South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala farm in 2020. The suspects will appear in court on Tuesday. Donald Trump clashed repeatedly with a judge and defended his family's business as he testified in a civil fraud trial in New York. During almost 4 hours of the witness stand, the former president disputed claims that he deceived banks and aired grievances with the case. In local sports, in a remarkable display of unity and support, the 4th edition of the MTC Knockout Project is dedicating its efforts to raising funds for the Tafellaga Brave Warriors as the team gears up for the 2024 Africa Cup of Nations to be held in Ivory Coast in January 2024. And with that, we have come to the end of the broadcast. Make sure you join me, Diana Master, on NMH at 1 every weekday at 1 p.m. to spend your lunch hour with NMH at 1, catching up on the latest news in Namibia and beyond. From all of us here in studio, we do wish you a lovely day ahead.